Yo, what's up guys? For those of you that don't know me, I have been a challenger player since set 3, and in this video, I'm going to be going over a headliner strategy guide. So there are already a few videos out there indicating what the strong headliners are and how you should play them. I actually do have that in this video as well. For example, here are all the 1 costs, 2 costs, 3 costs, 4 costs, and 5 costs. I also have itemization and how you should play the headliner and what you should pivot into. But that's not what this video is about. In this video, I really want to be talking about strategy and how to actually approach the headliner mechanic in general. The reason why I made this video is because I think that the tier lists will basically completely change after every patch because different cons will be stronger. So these tier lists will never be completely accurate, meta changes, and therefore fundamentals are much more important when trying to play around headliners. In the meta right now and probably in the future, you basically pick up any headliner you find early that will make your early game as strong as possible while playing a very cheap board. The reason why is because you want to be able to get to level 8 as fast as possible, assuming you're not playing a reroll comp. The reason why is because at level 8, you will have the chance to find a 4-cost headliner. For example, like a 4-cost headliner Akali, Ahri, TF, Blitzcrank. These are the headliners that will be able to close out games because in the early game, say you do find like a headliner Lilia, yeah, it's going to be really good early game, but you really need to get to level 8, look for the 4-cost headliner to really close out the game, because Lilia will just completely get outscaled. And usually the headliner you pick should generally be evaluated on how strong it makes your board right now. So in this video, I'm going to separate this strategy guide into 3 different parts. First part is how to approach the early game for headliners. Second part is going to be the mid game, when you should swap out your headliner if you find the stronger one. And finally, in the late game, I'll be going over how to build a late game board and how to be more flexible when building your board and the headliner you want to look for. Without further ado, let's get right into the early game. Okay, so in the early game, there are a few factors that you need to keep in mind when trying to figure out what headliner you want to buy. So basically in the early game, one thing that you need to consider is what items do you have. The reason why this is important is because let's say you have like bow, sword, and glove. If you pick up like this Nami headliner, you're most likely going to be playing around some disco board early, right? But the disco board is going to be something like Nami, Gragas, Taric, and an extra guardian like Kennen. If you look at these 3 items, you can't really make anything for your Nami. I mean, you can make like GS, but this item is terrible early game. It's an item that's only really good late game because it's a tank buster. You can make Last Whisper, but it's not good for Nami. It's an AD item, and IE is pretty trash for Nami as well. So in this situation, if you pick up a Nami Chosen, you're going to be left with a headliner that does not have any items at all, and you're just going to lose every single fight going into stage 3. And that's definitely not the move you want to make. The headliner you want to pick up should be dependent on what items you have. If you have this setup, these 4 AD headliners are really the ones you want to be looking for. AP, you want to look for these 4. And then if you have a lot of tank items, you generally want to be looking for some type of tank headliner because you want to itemize your tank. Of course, there are exceptions, and I'll get into that in point number 2, which is how does my headliner fit into my front line and my back line? So ignoring items, let's say your board is a 2-star Lilia and a 2-star Kennen, right? The headliner you really want to look out for is going to be something that fills in the gaps in your team. So for example, if you have this board, you probably do not want another like Lilia headliner because you're just going to end up with a board with 3 tanks, you'll do no damage, and then you just get shit on. So what I really want to look for is stuff like Corki, Annie, Evelyn, something that actually does damage because a strong board is going to be a good distribution from a tank and a damaged user. Same here. If you have Corki and Misfortune, you really want to be looking for a frontline headliner. This is simple enough. The final point I want you guys to keep in mind is, do I have any reroll potential for my headliner? So every patch is going to be different, but in this particular patch, if you get Emo Annie and you get a lot of Annies, you could potentially 5 lose into the first minion round and then roll down to 33 gold to see if you can hit 3-star Annie, and then if you do, you could just push levels. Same for Jinx. Bard and Misfortune are going to be 2-star reroll comps. I'm not going to get into these, but these are just generally some reroll comps you want to look out for depending on your headliner. Alright, on to the mid game. So this is the part where a lot of players get confused because they don't really understand when they're supposed to swap out like their 1-cost headliner for like a 2 or 3-cost one. And honestly, it's really not that complicated. The simple answer is you swap out your 1-cost headliner for a 2 or 3-cost one if the 2 or 3-cost one makes your board stronger. There are only a few spots really where you end up playing around a 2 or 3-cost headliner. I'm going to go over all of these types of spots that are categorized. These are all taken from my own stream, And basically, the first spot is if you end up having to sack the first 5 rounds, you generally need to roll for a new headliner at 3-2. So for example, right, in this spot, I'm at 62 HP, I'm on a 5 lose streak because I sacked the first 5 rounds, but I have a shit ton of gold. So in this spot, what I end up doing is I actually just level to 7 and roll for a completely new 3-star headliner, and then I win streak all of 3-2 to 4-1. Spot number 2 is if you already have like a headliner on your board, but the headliner that shows up in your shop is a higher cost, but it doesn't make your board stronger. In this case, you do not pick up the headliner because it just doesn't make your board stronger. This Jax, to play this Jax, I need to sell this Lilia. I end up dropping 5 KDA, I end up dropping Superfan. I'm gonna have like this random EDM Jax, which doesn't even do anything. So in a spot like this, you just do not buy the new headliner at all. So spot number 3 and spot number 4 are going to be the more interesting ones. Basically, in these spots, you do end up swapping your existing headliner. So for example, in this spot, right, I'm playing 7 KDA and my headliner is going to be a KDA Evelyn. And in my shop, I have a KDA Seraphine. So the answer to this is pretty obvious. You just sell your 1-cost KDA headliner for your 2-cost KDA headliner because the 2-cost unit is generally better at holding your AP items than your 1-cost. So play here is to just sell the Evelyn, play the Evelyn on my bench, and then play the Seraphine as my new headliner to hold like this JG or whatever, and move the Sunfire onto my Nico. The last spot is if you have a stronger headliner in your shop, but you have to flip most of your board to be stronger. So for example, the transition for this board is slightly less obvious. Right now, my headliner is going to be an Evelyn with a Gunblade. So I have 3 KDA, but I also have this Senna in my shop. The Senna is the correct play here to buy the Senna headliner and play around the Senna. You just sell this Evelyn, move the Gunblade over to the Senna, and your board will just be 2-star Lilia from this. Just play this Evelyn, and then you play this Senna, and then you just play Kennen, Gnar for 3 Superfan and 2 true damage. And you just carry to the Senna. Senna is an extremely powerful 2-cost headliner that you could get. And if you get it at stage 2, you usually just win streak all the way until level 8. And then at that point, you just flip your entire board to a 4-cost headliner. So now we can finally talk about the late game headliner strategy. And I think this is probably where most players get lost, especially if they have never played set 4 before with the chosen mechanic. In set 10 in particular, you can't really like hard force an exact version of a comp because every single game you cannot expect to hit a certain headliner with that exact trait. It is unreasonable to do that, and if you go into a game with that kind of mindset, you are not going to climb at all. You can still like hard force like a certain comp, like you could hard force a comp KDA every single game. You just need to be a lot more aware of the different variations of KDA that you can play. You might think that the only viable headliners you could pick up for KDA is Akali and Ahri, but there are actually a lot of different options that you could pick up as well. So for example, right, if you pick up Karthus, you could play into like the 3 KDA 5 pentakill variation or the 3 KDA 4 executioner KDA variation. You have a lot of backup headliners you want to pick up as well. Like for example, if you pick up like a frontline headliner like Blitzcrank, you can flex into 4 Sentinel like 5 KDA. You could also flex into 4 Guardian 5 KDA because you're usually playing around like the 3 Superfan units. If you don't hit any of these, because you're playing around AP items, you can also play around some variation of TF. This is super important because if you're only looking for Akali and the Ahri headliners, your chances of hitting, let's say your chance of hitting is like 10%, right? But if you open up all of your headliner options to like 4 of these different units, all of a sudden your chances of hitting a viable headliner to play in your KDA board become like 80%, and it's almost impossible for you to miss. So the main point I want to touch up on here is that when you're approaching the level 8 roll down and you're looking to build a board, you want to first decide what the primary comp you want to play towards, know what the viable headliners you can pick up for this comp, and understand what the backup options are if you don't hit. So for example, if I'm playing KDA, this is the base board, okay? This is the base KDA board, 5 KDA units, 3 Superfan. If you get a KDA Ahri headliner, you play towards 7 KDA, you just splash in Kaisa. Easy enough, right? If you get an Executioner Akali headliner, you just splash in like a random +1, random legendary like Alawi, Ziggs, whatever. And this board will do just fine. Spellweaver Ahri, you could choose to splash in a 5th Spellweaver like Sona. And if you get Executioner Karthus, then you don't play 5 KDA at all. You just play 3 KDA. You play into the Pentakill / Executioner board where you dual carry the Akali and the Karthus. And all of your Ahri items just go on the Karthus instead. The Pentakill variant, you just play 5 Pentakill with Gnar, Mordekaiser, and Yorick. And there are a few backup options, like I said before, right? So let's say like you completely miss your roll down, but you find like a Disco TF or a Disco Blitzcrank. This is a sample board you could play. You just move all of your RE items onto your TF and just keep all of the AD items on your Akali. And this is a board that could easily top 4 your games, even if you don't hit. Same for Guardian Thresh, 4 Guardian, 5 KDA. So this is sort of like the point that I want to make, right? Although like KDA is like the easiest comp you could play in the current patch, but there are like 7 or 8 different variations that you could possibly play. So like I could understand why like newer players like they kind of struggle on how to like build a board. Just understand what really makes a good board in the late game. It's about good itemization on your carries, a good balance between a front line and the back line. That's really all that matters. So my recommendation, just be more flexible on the headliner you want to pick up and use the headliner mechanic to fill in the gaps in your team. So like, for example, if you already have like 2 copies of Ahri and 2 copies of Akali, you probably do not want to pick up an Ahri headliner because you really just need 1 normal copy of Akali anyway. You kind of want to be looking for like a tank in that case, like maybe like a 2-star Blitzcrank. That will be like a better upgrade to your board because you just instantly get 3 copies of Blitzcrank for free. You know what I mean? Those are like my general tips for like building a board in the late game and how to play around like the headliner mechanic in the late game. And this applies for like the level 9 roll down as well. It's just instead of like these 4 cost units, you're just playing around stuff like Ziggs, Sona, Alawi, Yorick. Same shit as the early game, to be honest. You're just filling in the gaps and you're just playing around your items. All right, guys, on to the juice. I will also be linking this in the comments below if you're interested, but here are all going to be all the 1 to 5 cost headliners you want to be looking out for that are really impactful. So Kennen, Lilia, Cassante, and Tahm Kench are all going to be tanks that you want to be looking out for in the early game. You want to be stacking all of your tank items on them, and you just play strongest board into either 3-2 or 4-1 or 4-5, depending on when you want to roll down, and if you have to roll at level 7 or 8. Taric and Nami generally play more into the disco boards, so usually you're playing AP. Corki and Jinx generally play more into the AD boards, so right now in the current patch, Ezreal and Caitlyn are kind of trash, so generally it's just play into MF. But in the future, when the game is more balanced, you generally will pivot these boards into like Ezreal and Caitlyn and Jhin and Lucian. Evelynn is just usually going to be KDA because you just slam AP items on her and you pivot this into like an Ahri board and a Kali board. 2 costs you want to look out for. Generally, you want to take one of these if it upgrades your current board. So Garen is one of the best tanks in the game. You just take it almost instantly and put all your tank items on him. Bard, there are 2 options to play him. You either play into the Jazz reroll board, or if you get Dazzler instead, he's a really good item holder for all of your AP and attack speed items. Gnar is just a general good tank. You just slam all of your bruiser items on him. Even Shojin is fine. Deathblade, even tank items are good, and usually is good enough to win streak you all the way until level 8. Senna, broken AP holder, and Katarina, you have the option to play reroll Katarina if you get Crowd Diver. Otherwise, she's good at holding stuff like Hodge, JG, all your AP items if you're playing tempo. So on to the 3 costs. You generally only take one of these if it upgrades your tank because you already should have like a fully itemized like 1 or 2 cost unit that should be carrying you. So 3 costs headliner tanks you want to look out for is stuff like Mordekaiser, Echo, Nico, and Amumu. They all have the exact same itemization, just 3 tank items. The 3 damage ones you want to look out for are going to be Urgot and Samira. If you get Country, you can play into the reroll comp, or Urgot is good at holding your leftover bruiser items, and if you have a lot of AD items, you can just play tempo with Samira into fast 8. MF, you could just play reroll MF, or you could just take it into fast 9 and then play around the Jazz board. On to the 4 costs. So Karthus, Pentakill Karthus, you're just playing 5 Pentakill. Executioner, you play 4 Executioner. Akali is the same deal with Executioner. If you get KDA, you just play 7 KDA. Ahri, Spellweaver, this is like kind of the worst variant. I don't think Spellweaver is very good right now, but here you just play 5 KDA and you could consider 5 Spellweaver. Otherwise, it's usually just 7 KDA. TF is just Disco Dazzlers. And Caitlyn, you just usually play it with Superfans and Jazz. Caitlyn and Ezreal are both really similar. Right now in the current patch, that's really the only way you can play it, but in the future, once the game is balanced, you probably do not need Jazz to play around these 2 units. If you get Pentakill Viego, you just play Pentakill, and if you get Crowd Diver Zed, you just play around a Zed. The 5 costs headliners you want to look out for are just going to be Ziggs, Alawi, Yorick, Lucian, Jhin, and Qiyana. Ziggs right now is the best AP headliner you could get to hold your AP items. You just don't really worry too much about BIS because at this point you've already slammed your AP items. You just move all of your existing AP items into whatever headliner you get. So Ziggs just holds all your AP items, Alawi holds all your tank, and Yorick holds all your bruiser items. Lucian and Jhin hold all of your AD items, and Kiana sort of could just hold either bruiser, AD, or any utility item like these gloves. So this sums up my set 10 headliner strategy guide. If you guys found this video helpful at all, I would really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Twitch. And I linked this document in the comments below if you want access to like the itemization and how to play around these headliners. And I will see you guys next time.